Hello and welcome to Hard Copy on Channels Television, a program where we bring you down-to-earth conversations with the people in the news. I am Bukola Koka, standing in for your regular anchor, Kayla Megwa. And so tonight we turn our attention on the economy. Nigeria stands the risk of losing its economic gains if it fails to translate those gains from its reforms into tangible improvements in the welfare of the people. This is the frank submission of the World Bank at the October 2025 Nigeria Development Update Report, where it expressed concern that despite the country's recent economic stabilization efforts, an estimated 139 million people are still poor. What are those gains being posted by the Tinubu-led government? It has paid off $3.4 billion IMF loan, cleared over $800 billion in forward contract obligations, stabilized the naira with the FX reforms, and recorded economic growth of 3.2 and 4.3% within the last 2 quarters. Now, whilst these gains are mostly uncontestable, the question is how soon will they trickle down to become the experience of the average and poor Nigerians? I sat with the chief economist of the NESG on the sidelines of the 31st edition of the summit to do a critical examination of the Tinubu administration's reforms. And since the NESG is a non-profit and non-partisan organization, I began by asking him why the theme of this year's summit sort of aligns with the administration's reform agenda. Now you decide if the answer is definite or not.
Let's look back a little bit and look at before the administration came on board. The state of the economy was really rough, practically rough. So there are critically, I think, 3 reforms that the administration introduced: the FX harmonization, the subsidy removal, and I think there is other one major one, but they are in different pockets, but those are just the major ones. Reforms anyway has trade-offs. The impacts are not just going to be you reform today, then everything will just be good. They are like foundation. You lay foundation, you are building on, but in the process of laying the foundation, you are destabilizing the original existing structure, right? That process is painful. Everybody knows that. But when you understand the process that you are losing something here, but you are also gaining something here, or that this foundation you are laying over time is going to be the best for everybody, then we all understand. We all went through the impact of subsidy removal, went through the impact of FX, which practically was very hard. But if we ask the question, do we need the reforms? The answer is yes. Where we can argue as to the sequencing, right, of should we have done this before this, the administration knows best as to that. But the most important thing is that we need to move from where we were before and move forward on a well-established path. And I think that is how I can just summarize the reforms. Secondly, it's not just enough to introduce different policy reforms. It's also very important to look at how well managed those reforms might be. So you can then begin to see that a good reforms or a good intervention might produce bad results, possibly because you didn't really manage the process. And I think the government also is learning from that process to say that don't just introduce stuff, also manage the process. And but ultimately, I think the Nigerian economy is overdue for these recent reforms that we have seen.
So is the summit group sort of aligning with the thinking of the administration on the imperative of reforms? If it, tags its summit for this year, the reform imperative?
Yeah, NESG is an independent organization. We don't necessarily align with anyone, whether government or any institution. We align with evidence. Every of our advocacy is guided by evidence. We approach the government, we leverage whatever opportunities or resources we have for one single goal, and that is achieving a better country achieving a better Nigeria. It's for the national interest, right? And we advocate for a more competitive economy, a more open economy, a more stable. At the beginning of the year, we came up with a framework, which is towards a roadmap towards economic transformation. We had, designed the framework in such a way that you start with the phase 1, which is economic civilization, phase 2, economic consolidation, and then phase 3, economic acceleration. The stabilization has some pockets of reforms that we had advocated, some of them taken by the government, some of them the government might not take it. But the part is, the realization now is that if you look at some of the reforms that we took then, and now we all understood that we are receiving some gains. But where the problem comes is this. When an economy is so disjointed in a way that it doesn't carry the whole everybody along, any reform you are introducing is going to be very tough. For instance, the economic structure itself, it will be very tough to make any reform and suddenly you are seeing the impact on everybody's life. But we have to start from somewhere, and that is why our thinking aligns with what the government is doing in terms of those reforms. Let's start this, let's move ahead. And as you said, this year's theme is to also not just talk about the reform, but to look at the reforms and other different policy intervention within the objective of what do we want to achieve? What is the aim? And the aim is building a prosperous and inclusive economy by year 2030. Prosperous is good, is necessary, right? Because we have to improve on our efficiency, economy needs to grow, private sector needs to be involved. Inclusion is also very vital because this is about the people, right? And that is the whole idea of why we are here. We're engaging government in any form just to make sure that we are on the right path as a nation.
We'll talk about, the products of the engagement with government subsequently. But every reform should bear a human face, such that, the people at the lowest rung of the ladder are not left behind. But it seems as if the impact of the reforms embarked upon by this administration at the beginning has taken a heavy toll on Nigerians. And you listed the reforms earlier on. Have you seen the social investment component of the reforms of this administration, creating that form of balancing act or the shock absorber required to ensure that the vulnerable are not left behind?
Well, if you want me to answer that question, there will always be argument and counter-argument. As I told you earlier, the structure of our economy is such that when you introduce any reform, you have to expect some trade-offs, strong one. I've said it. There is no way, even when we have a better structure, you are still going to have trade-offs. You were buying the subsidy before, the few the cheaper stuff. Some people are, hitting the money. You don't care. You don't have enough infrastructure. Now you have to remove that. So these are narratives, right? And to be sincere, you agree with such a narrative. But the problem is an economy that is built in a way that it becomes difficult to reach people, to reach the real people. This reforms will be very, very tough. And when I say tough, I'm not saying the reforms will be impossible. No, but whoever is implementing the reform has a tougher job to do because you have to explain yourself. You have to be more efficient. You have to be more proactive and aggressive and making sure that you take care of the negative impact on the life of the people. So from the government side, yes, you have a different conditional transfer. Government will let you know that, okay, so far we've had so millions of people, we've gathered the data, we transfer. These are what the government is doing. But whether this is enough, we can say no in this situation. But the point is the government doing something about it? Yes. Is that enough? We can say not really. But the most important thing is that we cannot sit where we are and just assume that we're not going to change the system. We're not going to look out for a better Nigeria and then let everybody just go. No. And this conversation is part of why we are addressing the inclusion part of the reform. Inclusion. Having lasting impact on people means that you have to have a strong industrial base. You have to have strong productivity base, right? If people are not involved in the economic activities, if people are not involved in industrialization and quality job, there is no way any reform impact will reach them positively. So the foundation is that everyone must be included in that productivity process. I'm talking of job creation. I'm talking of quality job creation, not just anyhow job. I'm talking of formalization of the economy and so many other things. So these are some of the conversations that we had today, aiming towards improving, making sure that the reforms we've been talking about is pro-people.
Speaking of the social investment component as well, with regards to inclusion, have handouts worked so far when you look critically at the conditional transfer schemes? Or in the alternative, how would you recommend that that aspect could have been better deployed to empower the people? Because some would argue that, handouts are one-off. What was it that it was called at the beginning of the administration? Palliatives, are more demeaning to the people. So how could that have been managed?
Handouts and these interventions, mostly, even from the high of the government, is mostly to take care of the short-term impacts. They are not going to be a long-term. They are going to be useless on the long term. Like, I'm not going to keep feeding you and I say one day you become rich or you become independent. But I can do that. I can't send you away and say, no, go and suffer. One day you become independent. No, I can take care of you for a while. And so it's two ways. What the government is doing now is to, in my own view, is to try and address the fallout or the trade-offs from the reforms that we've had. But our inability to have, for instance, let me give you an instance now, strong database will keep impacting on how we reach out to people and how we impact people. Like what you have said now, if you ask somebody else outside that, somebody will tell you that, I don't know where that's taking place. I've never collected time. I don't know anything. It's a lie. Go hence elsewhere. You say, yes, we're given 1,000 or 10,000, whatever, So and I think over time we've been talking about this data, the need for us to have it, at least to have identity with it. Anywhere in the world, this palliative works. Anywhere in the world, it has to be done. Go to the US, in fact, they do that a lot. Give people unemployment benefit, this and that, in order to take care of them. But it's not going to work. It's not going to be impactful on the long run, because if you don't have quality job, how long are you going to be collecting money from the government? So for me, I think that path is okay, but we need to look deeper and wider as to whether that is sufficient enough to be a strong policy tool to use for a long time.
Speaking of policy tools, let's make progress now. The president, at the beginning of the summit, represented by the vice president, spoke about one of the tools deployed by the administration to help the vulnerable. And he spoke about the deployment of the 200 billion naira intervention fund to support MSMEs and manufacturers. Has that been effective when you consider the interest rate also attached to this? And this is key to
That's tough for me to answer. I think the government will be the right.
Yeah, but from the economic perspective, from the economist's perspective.
Yeah, so to answer whether that is effective or not is for me to go out and, find out whether such a statement is true or whether people receive this or whether. But on the macro space, interventions, palliatives are not strange. They are not something that we say, oh, Nigeria has come again. No, this is done everywhere. So whatever amount or whatever method the government wants to, deploy in doing that is right. You are not going to, I mean, for instance, yes, the SMEs, the challenges are still there. But if the government is in one way or the other pushing out this assistance in any form, well, that should be the right step.
You're watching Hard Copy on Channels Television, and my guest is the chief economist of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group. So if you've just joined us, you've missed quite a bit, but you're still in time for some interesting perspectives on the Nigerian economy, particularly under the current administration. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Hard Copy on Channels Television, a program where we bring you the hard conversations on policy issues and all other myriad subjects, as long as they have to do with national development. I am Bukola Koka, standing in for your regular anchor, Kayla Megwa. My guest today is the chief economist of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group. And in the last half hour or so, we've been looking at the reforms of this administration, particularly, as it ties with the theme of the current NESG, which talks about the reform imperative. Thank you for holding on, sir.
Thank you.
So, flowing from the commentary and the perspectives of the NESG that you have shared so far, one might ask how pivotal the summit group is to the economic policies of the administration, and not necessarily under this current government. How much of the reform, the recommendations of the group, have administrations been adopting to transforming the economy? And if they have been adopting the critical recommendations of the group so far, would we have made more progress than we've made so far?
Okay, I think that's a very important question. And let me tell you this. The formation at the beginning of NESG, the NESG as an organization is as a result of trying to create a path with the government to encourage private sector growth from more than 32 years of its establishment. Almost 90% of any reforms that you've seen implemented in Nigeria, we can say actually came from the advocacy of NESG. Talk about telecommunication, Nitel, MTN coming in those years. Talk about think about the railway, everything, every framework of new Nigeria in terms of expanding the role of private sector. And so the point is, and I think we have to also be very sincere with ourselves, is that NESG has been very significant in terms of having this opportunity to show Nigeria, or indeed the world, the potential that we have as a nation and the role of private sector. We cannot go anywhere without this private sector part. And you remember in those days of Abacha and so many things, you can't even talk about private sector as it were. So NESG came on board, and we've had a lot of policies recommended that we've seen implemented, and that everybody is enjoying today, that people don't even think that, people will just think that government just one day say, oh, let me privatize. No. That's on the first part. Second part, advocacy and recommendations or policy with government is not as simple as you call government, okay, do this, and say, yes, sir, we'll do that. But you have to keep doing it. We've been doing this for the past 31 years. And the question is, why do we keep doing this? Because we can't just stop. We can't just stop. Administration will come and go. Some will come, listen, do a little. Another will come, do many things. Some will come, do nothing. We keep talking, saying that this is what we need. This is the path we need. And again, sometimes the reforms that you see today, you may not necessarily know that many of the reforms that we have seen today, NESG has also been advocating for long about the need to stop corruption in this sector, the need to do this, the past so many ways. The ways and how the government would do it may be different, it's slightly different. But the idea is that we are always there to let the government know that you can't run this thing alone, and the role of private sector is key, and that we need to carry everyone along. And that's what we've been doing for years. And that's why we could have the presidency, the ministers come, and we let them know how the economy is going practically. We are not government agency, so we'll tell them this is where we are as a nation. This is the state of the economy as a nation. We presented the 1 trillion economy that the government is trying to use to, say this is our national goal, we want to achieve this by so years. And we presented the implications of that there are different pathways. We use different cases from China, from Brazil, and from India. This is how they did theirs, and this is the result. If we are serious about what we are saying, this is how we can do it. And so this is the role that we've been playing for the past 31 years. We cannot absolutely claim that, yes, everything we've said, they've done it. No.
And have they done it in a measure of 100%?
Of course, you can.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. That cannot even
But
be.
if they have adopted, much of the recommendations of the NESG, why is Nigeria still,
so adoption
at this current stage of development?
Yeah, so that's different from implementation. NESG is not the government. It's like you advising me that this is the best way for me to go. Say, thank you. I've heard you. Right.
But I also understand that in the past, the NESG has also been, critical part of the think tank of, ministries of finance under past administrations.
Yeah.
So has the group also been advocating the removal of petrol subsidy in the past?
Yes, in a way, not necessarily in terms of how the government must do it practically. But, the broader argument is that it's inefficient to our production. So something must be done. And I told you the other time that when you implement a policy, you also need to consider the trade-off. And that's practical. You also need to understand the sequence and so many other things.
But I wonder what the group's position would be as against the backdrop of the fact that the international organizations that are advocating these reforms, and also, being a huge part of institutions, from which Nigeria obtains loans. In other countries of the world, in the Western part, where these institutions are domiciled, they're still, implementing subsidies in their own economies. And that's a contrast to the advocacy for the Nigerian government. What are your thoughts on this contrast?
No. It depends on how you view it. Subsidy in terms of as an economy or subsidy remover from one specific product doesn't mean that you remove all the subsidy. We have subsidy in agriculture. You have fertilizer. Government is giving all these things out. And then, in fact, the subsidy we are talking about now in terms of the free subsidy that we're referring to. I told you again that it depends on how the government decides to go about this. Right, you can tell the government, okay, do this thing. Then it's left for government to say, okay, this is the data we have. This is how we think is going to move. But ultimately, you've seen us in several occasions also talking about the cost of high prices, inflation, interest rate, and I disagree with government. We don't necessarily agree or just take idea from international bodies and just say, oh, government should just do this thing, do that. No.
So, from the conversations that have been had between members of the private sector and the public sector at this 31st Economic Summit Group, what would you say is the most significant feedback that you're getting from the public sector in terms of reforms that you're advocating? Is another way of saying, are the private sector players happy after engaging with the public sector at this 31st Economic Summit?
Yeah, to use the word happy, you can't be happy. You can't see this type of the economy and just be happy when you even tell government, do this, do that. And I said, the dialogue is not just also about telling government what to do, telling ourselves, what do we need to do? Designing how we want to. There's nobody who's going to come to this and just be happy with the state. It will be fulfilled that you are contributing to the betterment of the country, but you cannot be happy with the current situation in the country. As I told you earlier, we'll keep insisting on what's good for the country, whether the administration now or then takes or not. We'll keep saying it. This is good for us. You are trying here, but we can do better. And so I think the overall feedback from here is that everyone believes that on the long run, there is no country without strong industry. And we just have to do this. It doesn't matter how long it takes us. We need to create job. We need to create quality job. We need to move from where we are now. Stability, civilization, interventions. Yes, short time necessary, but we need to ask ourselves, so where would this lead us? Where are we going to be in the next 5 years, 10 years? And so for me, I think that's a major feedback. And I hope that we'll have the strength to keep doing this. And I hope the government also will keep listening and doing their best in achieving that.
Indeed, that is the expectation.
Yeah.
And we hope that when we have this conversation again, we'll be posting not just, gains on paper, but gains in practicality as well.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your time on the program. I've been talking with Dr. Olusegun Omishaki, the Chief Economist of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group and the Director of Research of the NESG as well. Thank you for your time on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all we have for you on the program today. Thank you for watching. I invite you to join me again same time next week when I bring you another round of interesting conversations. I am Bukola Koka, standing in for your regular anchor, Kayla Megwa. Bye for now.